How's it going, everybody? And welcome back to another edition of the post game show here on the Cold Front Report. I'm your host Clayton Garrett, and normally I'm blessed with the presence of Jeremy Turner Montgomery as well as Travis Blakesley. But today it'll just be Trav and I. Trav, how you doing today? It was a good game today. It was a fun game to watch. A little slow in the first 3.5 quarters, we'll call it, but then it picked up towards the end. How you feeling today, man?
Good. Yeah, glad to be here. Fortunately, Jeremy's not here, but all you get is us. Yeah, it was a solid game. Everyone talks about the get right game. I wouldn't really call it that, but it was definitely a bounce back and take care of business type performance. And I think they handled the adversity well. I mean, the offensive line, you got one starter in there that's playing his actual, position he was lined up week one in. And I thought the game plan was solid. And yeah, we'll get into the day ball grade, but I thought he was a little bit more creative.
Yeah, I was pleased to see what transpired on the field today. It was a little sluggish there towards the beginning. There were some problems, but really you kind of touched on that with the problems that the Bills were dealing up front. So I kind of wanted to start off the offensive conversation with that offensive line topic, because really that was the most concerning thing I had coming out of today. But as you said, 4 of the 5 guys aren't even where they're supposed to be. That being Spencer Brown shifting over to left tackle, and then you have Darrell Williams sliding back out to right. It feels like we talk about that just about every other game at this point. Then you had Cody Ford come back in, and Ike Bacher at left guard, and Mitch Morris is your center. But losing John Feliciano this morning to the COVID list, as well as Deion Dawkins earlier this week to the COVID list, really kind of put this offensive line, which isn't really I wouldn't even call it mediocre or average at this point. Losing 2 of those pieces, it really doesn't help the Bills out at all in that regard. And it was blatantly obvious to begin this game. Josh Allen was running around for his life, and it was pretty much immediate the pressure he was facing throughout this game. Hassan Reddick and Brian Burns, this defensive unit for the Carolina Panthers was quite stout, and I was kind of afraid to see what it would have been if they were to have their defensive tackle in there who was also on the COVID list. But that offensive line, they weren't really holding up too well today. But as the game went on, it almost felt like as the Bills ran the ball a little more, it felt like they started to get a better flow for this game. And that kind of leads me to talk about the fact that Devin Singletary had 22 carries today. We were talking a little bit before we went live on air. And, the fact of the matter is the Bills were running the clock out a little bit towards in the fourth quarter on that last drive when they capped it off with a Gabe Davis touchdown. They were running the ball a little more to try and run the clock out. But it felt like today's game plan was far more creative and far more run-oriented than games of the past. So, Travis, how did you really feel that Brian Daboll did orchestrating this Bills offense and the production that they had today?
Like I mentioned earlier, I thought it was a little bit more creative. I really like that third down call where they gave Isaiah McKenzie in the Wildcat, something that we haven't seen. You put it on film. You have Josh Allen line up under center and then walk him out and, let Isaiah do his thing. I thought the numbers as far as carries can get a little skewed when you're behind in so many games, which we've had the second half of the season. Remember last year, we didn't run the ball a ton more really, but we were ahead in a lot of games. So we were able to chew out the clock, and we saw a little bit of that late in the fourth quarter. The first 2 attempts at it didn't go too well. But, we were able to score that late touchdown, but we were effective on killing the clock, which was most important rather than the points. I thought there was a couple times where there was a bit of an emphasis on down the field passing where, you like you mentioned, when you have that skeleton crew of an offensive line, I wouldn't really rely on that type of passing offense. And as we saw, Allen was sacked 4 times, but it only cost him 17 yards. There's a couple heady plays where he threw the ball into the line of scrimmage down at the receiver's feet, to avoid a sack. But I think overall, given the circumstances, I thought it was well executed. And although the Panthers have kind of fell off the map the second half of the season, this is a very good defense. I mean, whether it was yards or points, the Bills were 1 and one of us was 1 and the other was 2. We flip-flopped that. And I think that was a premier pass rushing, at least coming out of the edge with those two guys. And I thought, Spencer Brown had a tough game, like one of the commenters said. That's going to happen when you got a rookie who's really underdeveloped and playing out of position. But all in all, it's something that we needed to do. We took care of business, and on to next week. That's pretty much what most Bills fan expected. So we'll take it when we can get it.
Yeah, and I really, the Bills had to take care of business as they do for the rest of these games. They have to win out, and hopefully this is the first of the next three. And you really talk about, I don't really want anybody to be under the impression that the Panthers are some lowly team. I understand the carousel that they've had on the offensive side of the ball throughout the course of the season with PJ Walker and Cam Newton and Sam Darnold, and they've just had a variety of things happen on that side of the ball that has really kind of hindered their team for the most part. But on the defensive side of the ball, they are quite a stout unit, and they have quite a variety of talented pieces on that side of the ball. Whether it's in the front seven with players, as we mentioned, with their pass rush like Hassan Reddick or Brian Burns, or you can even mention players like Shaq Thompson, Shaq Thompson, and then you could just go on about their secondary with the pieces they have, such as Stephon Gilmore, and the list goes on. Jeremy Chin, they have a really good defense that they have put together throughout the last handful of years via the draft and free agency or whatever various moves they've made on that side of the ball. They have a lot of pieces over there, and they certainly could have given the Bills more trouble than it seemed today. And they did give the Bills more trouble than the score would indicate today. I will say that. When Josh Allen, you mentioned that he was sacked 4 times today. But some of the hits that he was taking throughout this game, man, as a quarterback who left the game last week with a walking boot on, I'm sure a lot of Bills fans were wincing as Josh Allen was peeling himself off the turf sometimes or another. And it was tough to watch. And those sort of things, that leaves me, just still really concerned for this football team and the sustainability of how they're winning these games and what they're doing to win these games. I thought that they had executed their plan today. They did a good job today. They did a good enough job to take care of business, and that's what they needed to do. I understand that I just mentioned that the Panthers aren't some lowly team, but you're not going to be playing teams such as the Panthers come to playoffs. You could play teams that are just as talented on the defensive side of the ball, which is quite optimistic. But the matter of fact is they didn't really have much push on the offensive side of the ball for the Panthers. They couldn't really score like the Bills could score. And I don't think they could score like the Bills could score, regardless if they were to have their field goal kicker or not. But that has to be mentioned as well. The fact that they lost their kicker, Zane Gonzalez, in pregame warmups today. That definitely plays a factor for how an offense operates and for how a team calls their plays, because there was a handful of times that the Panthers would get down in the red zone and they were unable to convert, unable to get any points, when in other scenarios, they more than likely would have had a kicker in field goal position. They would have been able to notch 3 points in there for whatever it was worth. But at that point, that's a completely different situation for the game, given the flow of the game. But that does go a long way. As far as the Bills' offense is concerned, today it was kind of hard to judge Josh Allen. I feel like, this is kind of the theme that we're going on here throughout this season is, the way we judge Josh Allen is going to be really impacted by the amount of pressure that he faces from the amount of protection that he gets. And today it was far and few between that he was able to have time to pass the ball. And it was frustrating to watch. People who cover the Bills, people who watch the Bills fans, you're left but to do nothing but hope that this offensive line, as they get their pieces back, that they can get better. But the sore spot of it for me, really, that was these last handful of weeks, I felt like were quite vital for this offensive line, not necessarily to get astoundingly better from week over week or better in this last month in comparison to the last 12 weeks. For me, really, these last 4 games for this offensive line was great opportunity for them to gel, for them to get games get games snapped as a unit, from left to right, guys playing where they're meant to play. Like you said at the onset of the show, Travis, 4 guys are playing that aren't playing where they're supposed to be. Like we mentioned, Spencer Brown playing left tackle. He's supposed to play right tackle. And Darrell Williams is supposed to play inside at right guard. And I just feel like the opportunities that this Bills offense has had to have their 5 guys, their 5 best guys, where they want them and how they want them lined up, those opportunities have come far and few between this season. And I was really hoping that these last 4 weeks was going to be a really good opportunity for them to get their feet under them and really kind of grow as a unit, if you will. And it's quite disappointing to see COVID kind of, derail that and derail what would have been a great opportunity for them heading into the playoffs. As they're looking to have a wild card game. But that I thought that was vital. I thought that was an important piece for this offense to maybe find some sort of flow or rhythm or some sort of feet under them in regards to the running game over these last couple of weeks. But losing John Feliciano and losing Deion Dawkins, it was quite apparent today, say the least.
Yeah, it was, it was obvious, especially when their strength is coming off the edge. It was very. I thought Darrell Williams did a solid job out on the right tackle. What we don't normally say is Cody Ford doing well, but I didn't notice him all that often. He wasn't a complete turnstile, so it's good to know that he hasn't kind of went off the reservation in that aspect. But you mentioned Spencer Brown. I mean, this is a kid who we didn't even expect to see get many snaps this year, regardless. He didn't start to begin the season. He was a pleasant surprise there at right tackle and affording Darrell Williams a move down inside. But to ask him to, I don't like this carousel when one guy gets hurt. It's this domino effect of moving pieces. I get it. You can't have Doyle out there playing left tackle, but once you've committed to having Spencer Brown as your designated right tackle, you needed to have a better plan for the swing tackle, the backup tackle. And just to have him move around is not fair to his development. I mean, me and you, Cody, has mentioned this multiple times for Cody Ford. As much as as much as we trash him, we both thought it wasn't fair the way they handled it. Everyone except for the coaches seemed to know that he was not a right tackle, yet they put that square peg in that round hole for a while. So, I don't love that, the musical chairs, and it's great. Yeah. Have guys be able to move into different positions in case of emergency, but that's to finish a game. That shouldn't be to, start a game. So it's going to be the next 3 weeks. I know you asked for 4 weeks, but unfortunately it's going to have to be 3 weeks because next week, there's not going to be a drop off in talent as far as pass rushers. Watching the Indianapolis game versus New England, that was an intense game. I mean, I see that defense bringing the same intensity that they brought Indianapolis for most of the game. They kind of had a taste of their own medicine where the quarterback only threw enough passes that you can count on one hand. In a reverse role. So it's going to be. After we lost to New England, I was looking forward to this matchup because I think in good weather we have a much better chance to get up on this team. But like you said, if we're not able to get our offensive line in order and they're not able to gel, which they haven't done all season, it's going to be a tough ask, especially with a quarterback who has an injury. He didn't really show it, but again, anything lower body, it's something you got to monitor.
And you know what? Let's take this for what it is, okay? Can we all sit here and say that Josh Allen's a tough guy? I think he's a pretty tough guy.
Of course.
And any typical tough guy, they're not going to limp even when they might want to, or they feel it, or they'll just walk. They'll keep their pace and they'll grit through whatever pain it is just so everybody knows that they're all right. He can't even go out and have a dinner with his fellow quarterback and his girlfriend and have a double date and have a dinner without Bills fans pulling out their phones and getting nice pictures of him as they're waiting to be seated without a walking boot on. And obviously, Bills fans are very, very enamored with the quarterback. Everybody's worried about Josh Allen's foot injury. Obviously, it's a big deal as the Bills rear to go into the playoffs. But, I have a certain feeling. I'm not sitting here saying that Josh Allen's more hurt than we're led to believe, but I think there's a certain amount that we have to we have to kind of factor in there that Josh Allen might grimace through some pain and he might deal with it. And he deals with it better than a lot of other people might. But that's just worth mentioning because those sort of things they can kind of accumulate and come up and bite you over time. And I don't really want to see that to be the case for Josh Allen. And today, that's why today was so worrisome for me. It wasn't necessarily that I was worried about the Bills beating the Panthers. And, the next 3 weeks, it's not even necessarily, obviously I'm worried about the Bills beating the Patriots next week. That goes to say. But it's not like I'm worried about them beating the Falcons or the Jets. That's not the biggest concern for me. The biggest concern for me is seeing how this offensive line holds up so that the quarterback can hold up going into the playoffs. That is the biggest concern for me. Because these sort of things, they do hurt longevity. If you don't protect your quarterback year over year, it's not sustainable for his career, as we've seen with numerous different quarterbacks who have gotten beaten up and carted out of the league.
One
if
we
you
just
will.
faced.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a situation that I'm sure nobody at One Bills Drive and no Bills fan wants to see this team have to deal with after the Bills giving them $258 million. The Bills have their franchise quarterback, and it would be just an utter disappointment to see him go down with injury. And, that's really where my concern comes in, because week over week, coming out of last week, coming out of the game with a walking boot, and then he comes out there this week and you're watching him getting crunched between 3 different defenders as 2 other ones are about to hit him as well. And it's just, it's quite frustrating. And, if it's frustrating for us to watch, how do you think it feels to be in that room? That room with that offensive line, and it was something that I've kind of, pondered over the last couple of days as to really how much we can truly judge Brian Daboll and how he manages this abysmal offensive line and his offense to go alongside it. The one thing that I really wish we would see more of, and I'm not sure if we will, I didn't see anything that was hindering Josh Allen's mobility today, to say the least. He was moving around fine. He was making moves in the pockets. He didn't look timid on his feet. So those are all good signs, obviously. But the one thing that I really have been hampering on and been saying all season long is that I really wish that the offensive coordinator would reestablish the line of scrimmage. And what I mean when I say that is move it. Boot legs, boot him out right, boot him out left. Josh Allen can throw rolling to his right or rolling to his left at this point, and that's been proven throughout the course of the last 2 seasons. Excuse me. I understand there was an issue with Josh Allen rolling to his left at some point or another. I believe it was about he still had an issue with it earlier this season, but it feels like, teams have honed in on him rolling out to his right so much that he's grown used to rolling out to his left and having to make plays in that fashion. So if you ask me, he's kind of a limitless quarterback with his mobility and his athleticism that he has, but you limit him to the pocket. Why? It's not because the offensive line is good. It's not because you have certain protectors that you trust more than others. I really don't understand why they don't move this line of scrimmage more often. And that's really, what I've been wanting to see. Anytime you see them run a bootleg, it really, I think they ran a bootleg today and it turned into, it was on 3rd down and he connected with Dawson.
I was going to say there was 2, the one Sweeney dropped and then the Knox, but they come off a play action. I mean, I don't understand why they don't just straight up, you don't need to run that off a play action all the time. You can
snap and boot. He does it anyways. He's going to have to do it anyways. That's kind of what we've seen over the last overall season. Really, this offensive line has been the topic of discussion since literally the first week when they lost to Pittsburgh. And the offensive line, obviously there was some mishandling somewhere or another, but that's neither here or there. You can't sit here and pluck $15 million offensive guards off of rosters or sign guys in the middle of a season that are going to help the offensive line issues that you're dealing with right now. So really that leads me to look at the coaches, because that does fall on their shoulders to really kind of work with what you got. I understand it's kind of hard to scheme an offense with a bad offensive line. I understand that entirely. That it's almost borderline impossible. But the Bills have gotten by with this offensive line. Not saying that they should go in next year and say that this is the crew that they want. They shouldn't do that by any means, in my opinion. But I'm curious. That's where I can really only find any fault with Brian Daboll at this point. Was, really, why doesn't he help his quarterback more in those sort of situations? I understand you can only sprinkle. You can't run a boot every single play. But when the quarterback is facing pressure just about every single time he drops back, and like we said, that pass rush on the other side today wasn't anything to sneeze at. But at the same time, this is not a sustainable way to win, and this is not how you're going to win going into the playoffs. This is not how you're going to beat playoff teams. That's why it was really refreshing to see them, even though they weren't really getting huge chunks with the running game during certain portions of the game today. It was kind of refreshing to see them trust Devin Singletary and give him a workload, not just Just give him 22 carries. And I understand at the end of the game, he probably had about 6 or 7 of those that were added on. But at the same time, 13 carries through 3.5 quarters for Devin Singletary is far above average from what we've seen in recent weeks. I think there was a stat that was shown on the broadcast today expressing just how bad or how often the Bills don't run the ball in just certain situations. I believe it went 31, 26, and 30. And that's about the room that I thought that the Bills would be in, towards the bottom of the league in the running game. But as far as what we saw today was good enough. And like I mentioned earlier, I really feel like this offensive line can get in a much better flow if you were to have a more of a focal point on the running game. If these guys got their pads moving forward, if they got their feet churning out and they started to get some sort of momentum and establish the line of scrimmage, you got to think about it. That takes a toll on a front seven. That is a matter of fact. If you're coming in body punch after body punch with the running game, whether you're getting 3 yards or 4 yards, you're sprinkling in here and there to tire out the opposing defensive line so that they can't just pin their ears back and come like bats out of hell into the face of the quarterback. And I feel like that's been the case far too often this season for the Bills offensive line and their quarterback. And that's just what this offensive line has led to in the situations that this offense deals with because of it.
Yeah, it's a shame Jeremy isn't here because he's been clamoring for giving Singletary a workload, and we did it. He ran hard. We see all off season they were talked about his burst and his training and how he's gotten faster. He shaved 1/10 of a second off. He looks quicker. He's hitting the holes when they're there. I thought there were a couple plays where he had a seam, and he exploited it. And there was one where he got that face mask where he would have had a substantial gain if it wasn't for that. But he was effective, and like you said, it was good enough. And I think at this point, that's all we can really ask for. When you're playing a team that's weakness is against the run, they're undersized, but they are fast. You got to be able to take advantage of lighter boxes. So I thought that the play calling, or at least the design, where there was a couple times where Allen called for an alert, and it probably was a pass play that he audibled into a run because of what he saw in front of him. So those are the times you got to execute. We didn't see a ton of defenders knifing in the backfield, blowing our guys back. So it was a solid performance for the offensive line in that aspect. I still see people saying, someone this morning on Twitter said the Bills got a tank for a running back, and I'm like, what this is not 1965. Nobody's tanking for a running back. And I think that, if you put Devin Singletary, on the Colts, would he be Taylor? No, but he would have a hell of a season. I'll tell you that, because he can find yards. He keeps it north and south. And he just proved that he's a suitable running back when you give him more than 7 opportunities to run the ball. I think the Zach Moss experiment is pretty much done, and I think they're better for it as far as, if you're a big time run team, I think being able to rotate the backs is smart, because if you're handing off the ball 30 to 40 times a game, you're going to need that. But when you're only handing the ball off, today, 25 times, and that's a lot for this offense, I think it makes most sense to get the guy in there who you trust the most and let him feed off of what he's seeing in front of him. There is chemistry when it comes to the running back and his blockers. So just like we talk about with the pass rush, and to the offensive line to an extent, these guys need reps. And I think what we saw today was suitable. Do we need to run to set up the pass? I don't think so. I think it could be the other way around. And it sets up those nice play action passes where those chunk yards that we got Knox involved a bit. And you're going to have to run. It's the old cliche. When you get to cold weather, when you get to the playoffs, you're going to have to run. I don't care what anyone says. It's been proven. It is what it is. You run and you stop the run. And if you have a quarterback who can take over a game, you're in it. So it's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, and I'm glad you kind of touched on the passing game with Dawson Knox, because that was the next direction I was going to go with this, given the fact that the offensive line isn't where it needs to be for the Bills. That's just a fact of the matter. But the better part of that, the good part of Dawson Knox really kind of coming into his own this season and having the breakout year that he's had, obviously 8 touchdowns, and being the player he's been for this offense, it's really fun to see Josh Allen have a true safety blanket. And not to say that he hasn't in years past with players like Cole Beasley, but to have that bigger body mismatch safety blanket, the guy that he can look to, whether it's in the flats, whether it's in the middle, a player that he can trust that has that size and the mismatch on the defensive side of the ball, it does wonders for this offense. Like we were talking about that boot earlier, there's so many things this offense can do with the versatility that Dawson Knox adds with his athleticism. And that's really just been that's been a conversation for years. It's just been a matter of if he can put it together or when he'll put it together. And to see that today, that I didn't want to go over the Bills passing attack today. And there's another topic I want to talk about. I'll get to that in just a moment. But I didn't want to talk about it without mentioning Dawson Knox and just how comfortable he looks in this offense and how happy I was today to see that they were getting him involved early and often, to see that he was clearly a part of getting this offense going, getting this offense off to a good start. And, they didn't really get off to a good start. They went 3-and-out in the first 2 series, if I'm not mistaken. But to see Dawson Knox get involved, I just want to see, game plans where players are the targets, are the hot routes in certain situations. Clearly we're not in the room and we don't know who a hot route is on play X, Y, or Z. We don't know that. But, the thing I'm getting at is the Bills offensive coordinator hasn't done the best job of putting guys in certain situations where they're the focal point of whatever play it may be, or whatever drive it may be, whatever situation it might be, whatever is best for the offense and the player, and whatever correspondingly works the best all in all for the offense. And I know that was something that we were talking about last week after the Tampa Bay game, so I didn't want to come out tonight and not mention it. I feel like Dawson Knox had a good game today. And another player that, it's the biggest conversation of the offense aside from Josh Allen, clearly, is Gabe Davis. And Gabe Davis is a player who earlier this season, I wasn't too sure if he was going to develop into that wide receiver 2 come the latter portion of this season. But clearly with the inactivation and the knee injury to Emmanuel Sanders and the role that he has really taken upon, Gabe Davis is really, he looks to be pretty solid for this receiving core. He looks to be doing a really good job. I really like the routes he's running, and they're getting him involved in creative ways. I like what Gabe Davis brings to this offense. I've always liked what Gabe Davis brings to this offense. It's just a matter of if he can go out there and do it at this level when he's being covered by cornerback 2s, when he has to be asked to move from wide receiver 4 to wide receiver 2. That's a big jump for some players. And last year around this time when he was asked to do that, he wasn't performing the way he did today or last week, quite frankly. Travis, what are really your thoughts about Gabe Davis and what he's been, what he's really kind of really turned into for this Bills offense?
Has Gabe Davis dropped a pass on the sideline yet in his career? He's money on the sideline. I tell you
that long ball today.
Yeah, but I'm just saying those ones where he's kind of posted up in the toe tap, he's 99%. We talked a lot about Gabe Davis on my show last week. Obviously it's an easy talking point where, by de facto he's going to get more reps, but I do think this is an offense that kind of missed his versatility, where he's probably the best run blocker as a wide receiver on our team. He, like I said, has great possession on the sidelines with getting his feet in bounds, especially when it's that scramble drill and Josh Allen is rolling out to either his left or his right. He always seems to find that open spot on the sideline. But also the red zone threat. I mean, he is our tallest receiver. I mean, probably outside of Jay Kumro, but he doesn't really get many snaps. And the last couple of weeks has shown his propensity to kind of find that seam, kind of like Nelson back with Fitz, where he'd be able to kind of find that seam between safeties and corners or in between the linebacker and the nickel, and then makes himself available when things break down in the back of the end zone, where Allen was able to fire that rope in there to him. So regardless, I think we're going to see him on the field more. I think he'll eat into once Sanders is healthy, I think he'll eat into his snaps, but he'll also eat into Cole Beasley snaps as well. I think he's, especially on the other side of the 50, he's a guy that needs to be on the field more often than not. And like you mentioned, he was a little deceptive getting behind that second layer of the defense on that deep pass where, that ball was thrown a yard shorter, and we're talking about a big time touchdown scored by Gabe Davis, who doesn't have that 40 where you necessarily think he'll be able to take the top off. But as far as big time plays, over 15, 25 yards, he's consistently made them ever since he's come into the league. So Gabe Davis is someone who I think Allen is very comfortable with. He's a professional. He says all the right things. I mean, how many John Brown talked about how he knew the playbook better than him his rookie year. So, that's a little hyperbolic, but still, he seems like the kind of guy that wants to be on the field, but you never really noticed him get sour. He said he was biding his time in an interview, and I think his time has come. So between him and, Knox, like you were talking about earlier, it's good to know we still have options when, Stephon Diggs need to take a pop, or Cole Beasley's, banged up after a big time catch.
Yeah, and you slightly mentioned the return of Emmanuel Sanders, and that really kind of goes into the conversation about Brian Dable. And with that being said, before we get off of our offensive conversation, I want everybody in the comments to give us their weekly Brian Dable approval grade. Grade Brian Dable's play calling and how he orchestrated the Bills offense today from F to A. Give us your opinion and let us know in the comments below, and we'll show them right on the screen. But as I was saying, you mentioned how the return of Emmanuel Sanders and what that kind of really means for Gabe Davis and kind of what direction that leads for the Bills offense. That's what I'm excited to see. But at the same time, I'm really more so excited to see that because I want to see how Brian Dable integrates these guys with one another. Because that goes to what I was saying earlier with how he situationally draws things up for his playmakers. And that's been a conversation that I've had about Brian Dable ever since probably 2018, since his first year as offensive coordinator for the Bills. Because, while it's good to have a lot of, talented cooks in the kitchen, sometimes there's too many cooks in the kitchen and stuff happens. And it leads to more inefficiencies than you would initially guess because of really just the too much, just not the lack of cohesiveness, the lack of just having a lot of plays drawn up to have these guys work with one another and work in synchronicity. And that's not to say that they haven't had the opportunities to do that throughout the course of this season. But that is to say that when they have, I haven't seen many good examples where all of these guys are given opportunities and the offense is working efficiently. And that goes to what we were really talking about last week with this offense. When they play good, when they're looking when they've looked their best in 2021, they still haven't quite met the efficiency and the potency that they had in 2020. And could that be because of, defensive coordinators scheming things against this offense? It very well could be. But I think that also goes to credit to the fact that, the offensive coordinator struggles to to feed his playmakers the ball in certain situations in which they thrive. So that is something I'm really excited to see for Gabe Davis. I'm still of the belief that the Bills need to invest in a wide receiver early this offseason, I don't really envision them investing money into a receiver, more so drafting one early. So I think that the Bills should take that route still this offseason. But given the growth of Gabe Davis and what he's been able to display over the last couple of weeks, that leaves me more than optimistic for his future and what he means for this Bills offense. But let's shift gears and talk about this Bills defense, which did have themselves today. They did play very good. 2 sacks for F.A. Obata. It was kind of funny to see just the number of former Panthers that were having their names get called against the Panthers because it's always funny. It's always been funny for Carolina North, and we've seen these sort of things in the preseason, just not in the regular season. And the first time we see F.A. Obata's name mentioned this season, he might have had 1 sack that he pushed someone out of bounds earlier this year, but the first multi-sack game of his career comes against his former team, and A.J. Klein wrapped things up with an interception at the end. That's not something I was expecting coming into the day. But Travis, what were your thoughts overall on how this Bills defense performed and what the game plan was and really just how they executed today?
Well, I think the game plan was solid. They knew they needed to stop the run, and outside of a reverse and one big Chuba Hubbard run, I think they did a great job. I mean, Cam's going to get his yards. It's unfortunate that he scored that touchdown, but overall, the defense did well. They dropped a couple interceptions, which, this is the second week in a row where we could have turned the ball over, but that's the way it goes. They come in bunches, and then it's feast or famine. So I thought the defensive line, that was a point, a topic that we brought up a lot on my show, and I was watching, for the most part. I thought they started off slow, but I think as the game wore on, I thought the pressure started getting there, whether it was with just the front four or they were dialing up the blitzes. This is not a great offense. It's a bad offensive line they were going up against. So 4 sacks, I think, is pretty much the minimum. But there's too many missed sacks. I mean, Mario Addison is dancing with these quarterbacks more often than he's sacking them, and it's just it's tough watching teams convert, especially on third down when you have them right in your midst and you're not able to end a drive or get a substantial loss. But like you said, getting a turnover from AJ Klein at the end, it's garbage time, but it's good to see. And I thought Levi Wallace. I think I'm not worried about him anymore. I was worried about him stepping into that quote unquote number one de facto corner, but I really think he's playing with a lot of confidence. I think he really believes in himself and his skills, and he's not playing timid. He's playing real aggressive. I think so. Some of them were close, bang bang plays where he was pretty physical with the receiver or the back, but I really like what I'm seeing out of him. Dane Jackson's scrappy out there. He's going to get beat every now and then, but solid overall. And the safeties, Poyer could add another pick, but it went through his hands.
Yeah, I believe Tre'Davious White's the one that said that getting an interception in the NFL isn't easy unless you're Jordan Poyer. I think that's something Trey White said. Yeah, I wanted to talk about Levi Wallace specifically, so that's why I'm really happy that you would have brought him up. Because just to go off what you were saying, he is looking aggressive. He looks confident. He's playing fast. He's playing physical. All the things that you need. He's playing instinctive too. And you really think about it, I'm not necessarily, I've never been scared about Levi Wallace. I'm not concerned about Levi Wallace. I haven't been concerned about Levi Wallace since the latter portion of the 2018 season when he was elevated from the practice squad. And he was a good football player. And there's a reason why Levi Wallace has been his spot opposite Trey White up until this point where he's been elevated to cornerback one. And to say that, DJ Moore is a pretty good receiver, but he's had a hamstring injury hampering him, but he wasn't traveling. Levi Wallace isn't traveling with these receivers. But at the same time, he has that spot for this Bills defense, and he has done nothing but prove the matter of fact is that he can handle it. And the only concern I have for Levi Wallace is the price tag that he's really kind of going to command, because I'm not going to sit here and say he's going to command $9-10 million here in free agency. Not by any means. That's not what I'm saying whatsoever. But this play that he has put on over the last 2 weeks. So let's say that he continues this throughout the playoffs. He is going to earn himself quite a pay bump in comparison from this year to next year. And my hope is that the Bills can keep him. I'm not really concerned more of Levi Wallace, really wanting to get out of Buffalo. That's not something that we've really had to worry about with these players ever since Sean McDermott took over. I'm not really concerned of him turning tail and getting out of Buffalo as soon as he can. That's not my concern. Where my concern lies is somebody going crazy and offering him money that he can't refuse. And there's always that one team. There's always the Jaguars, always the Browns. There's always that one team that wants to give, not necessarily a guy that doesn't deserve the money, but overspend to get a guy on their roster that is I'm not going to call him a marginal talent, but he's an average guy. He's a guy you don't have to worry about out there at cornerback. And that's where my concern lies more so than anything with Levi Wallace. But as far as what he has brought to this Bills defense, I think he's continued to do what he has established himself to do throughout the course of his career. He has been a solid football player at cornerback one, just like he's been a solid football player over there at cornerback two for the last 3 years. And hopefully Bills Mafia gives him more credit and they don't really harp on him and nearly as much as they have in the past, because, I don't think he's been given nearly enough credit. I think there's been far too much critique on Levi Wallace over the last couple of years, given the fact that he's opposite one of the 7 best corners in football, and he's going to get a large portion of the targets because that guy is good at locking down his guy. So that's just simple math. And this Bills secondary, they played well today, but I really wanted to talk about Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde, because playing teams that do struggle passing the ball, such as the Panthers and such as playing quarterbacks like Cam Newton. Playing Cam Newton today, it was fun to watch this defense and what Leslie Frazier really had dial up for the game plan. And it kind of goes to show something that Jeremy and I have said here on Colfer Report for so many years. Anytime Sean McDermott is playing these mobile quarterbacks, is playing these guys who really kind of predicate a majority of their game on the running game and what they provide between the tackles, it has never gone good for the opposing offense. Sean McDermott is really good when it comes to defending these run-oriented quarterbacks, guys who like to scramble, guys who like to get out of the pocket and get creative, or even, a guy who he practiced against every single day in Carolina, like Cam Newton. This defense, they were flying around, they were making plays, and they were playing really physical. Last week, there was a point made, I believe, in a short yardage situation at the end of the game as to how I mentioned how Tremaine Edmonds was tackling. I believe it was Leonard Fournette on a 3rd and 1. Today, on a 2-point conversion, you saw him get squared up with a 6'6", 260-pound Cam Newton right in the hole on a 2-point conversion, and he put him right to the ground. So, I mean, this defense, they continue to prove themselves week over week. They continue to be productive. They continue to be volatile, and they continue to make plays regardless of who they're playing. So hopefully this momentum that they have garnered throughout this game against the Panthers, it only carries into next week as they go into New England.
Yeah, and it's funny listening to the broadcast because so many times it's like they're giving the Bills props, but they don't realize that they have been the best defense all season long. Like, yes, there were a couple games where we got ran on. Let's put it into perspective. I mean, if a team is playing in 40, 50 mile an hour wind and they only throw the ball 3 times and they end up with a W, I mean, yes, they're going to give up rushing yards, but if you put it into the total of yards, it's not really that big of a deal. Same with today. Like, they talked about, they gave up over 100 yards at halftime. Yeah, but they gave up like 40 passing yards. So I think you're going to take that. Is there chinks in the armor? Of course. I mean, they're not physically overpowering. They're not in statute. They're not that big, but like you mentioned with Jordan Poyer and Hyde, I mean, those are guys you can bring down into the box. They can fill gaps. You don't have to worry about them, sidestepping a tackle. They're going to put their nose into a guy. So we see it all the time being Bills fans for the last 20 years, but it's kind of like they're giving us a backhanded compliment when they talk about, the Bills defense. No, they've been at number 1 all season long, pretty much. And they deserve it. They make plays. Their defensive line, albeit I think they should be producing a little bit more, but it's stout. And they got great side to side linebackers who can do a lot of things. They're multifaceted. And you mentioned before, when you have a running style quarterback or a run throw style offense, they're going to be going for their first read, and Leslie Frazier is pretty masterful by taking away the first read. So if you can take away the run and you can force these guys to throw, generally it does not go well. And you just mentioned time after time, the track record is usually in the Bills' favor. So, the defense is played just as I expected. There are going to be matchups that do not bode well for them, but as we mentioned earlier in the show, that's when the offense needs to come to the table. The Colts are not a team that are going to beat the Bills 9 times out of 10. If the Bills offense comes to play and they don't beat themselves, that's a team that they can beat. Yes, are they going to give up the running yards? But in today's NFL, we want them to run the ball. If we have an elite quarterback, you want the opposing team to run the ball, regardless of the outcome.
Yeah. And, what you just said there kind of really epitomizes this upcoming week for the Bills, doesn't it? I think the Bills can certainly beat the New England Patriots. I think the Bills have all the horses they need to beat the Patriots. It's not a matter of beating, the Tom Brady-led Patriots. I am really excited to see how this matchup unfolds in not 50-mile-per-hour winds. Because, even though there were 50-mile-per-hour winds, once Brian Dable started to have faith in his offense in his quarterback to be able to pass the ball through the gusts, the Bills were able to move the ball on them. But that could, that's for a variety of reasons. It's going to be a completely different matchup in a completely different situation. I don't know what the weather's like in New England. I don't know if it's going to snow or rain or hail next week there. It's quite volatile as it is here at home in Buffalo. So you never really know in that regard, I suppose. But at the same time, I think if the weather isn't a factor, I think the Bills, they really do have a good shot at this game next week. I'm quite excited to see how the matchup unfolds because a lot of the things that we have discussed here in the post-game show in regards to the matchup with the Carolina Panthers, they're question marks going into next week, and they're going to be answered by next week as well. They're week-over-week questions about this offensive line. This defense is what it is. They're one of the best units in football. I'm excited to see what this defense can do against the Patriots when they have to pass the ball more than 5 times in the game. If they have to. If that's the case, I think the Bills, I'm not going to sit up here and make any predictions, but there's no secrets in that locker room. There's no secrets in that organization what that game is for, what these last 4 games are for, really. The Bills are playing, they're trying to win they're trying to win their division. They're trying to dismantle the Patriots right now, a position where, personally, I didn't really expect them to be in this season. And, as football players, as coaches, is that something where, a coach can be pompous or arrogant and say, well, I never expected us to be number 2 in the division. Nobody in that locker room is going to say that. Nobody's going to come out to the microphone on a podium and say that. And I'm not sitting here saying that's the impression that I was under for them. But, to say the least, I believe it's a disappointment where they're standing right now, and they know where they stand. But the matter of fact is they're not out of the race, and they control their own destiny. And if they beat the Patriots next week and they handle business as they handled it today, then they're going to be in far better shape next week than they are right now. It's just a matter of, they control their own destiny. If they don't beat themselves and they maintain the line of scrimmage next week on the defensive side of the ball, it's going to be a fight, and I'm excited to see how it fares for the Bills.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully we're able to put our most complete game, because I believe if you get just like the Colts did, if you get the Patriot, if you take an early lead, you're playing a different team essentially. Patriots are great when they're able to play with the lead and dictate the game, but if they get behind, they still have a rookie quarterback. The same could have been said for Ben Roethlisberger led, Super Bowl team. He was in great position all season long. You put the game on their shoulder, and just like you mentioned earlier, they have a track record against those running quarterbacks, but they also have a great track record against rookie quarterbacks. So, I was hoping to see the offense, first of all, come out in the first quarter quicker and score. But also halftime. I mean, this is a 3rd week in a row where we've gotten the ball in the second half. We've scored prior, and we are not able to do anything with it. Coming, 3 and out, maybe 1 first down. So those are the things where it's like, if you're gonna take the ball in the second half, you got to score. You got to move the ball. You got to do something, or else you might as well be taking it. When you win the coin toss. But it's gonna be everything, I'm sure the team asked for, as far as just having that opportunity to come back. And it's good that it's a quick turnaround as far as, scheduling wise. I'm sure they still have that sour taste in their mouth from the first game. And I think it's going to be a dogfight. They just need to not beat themselves, like you mentioned. Spencer Brown can't be turning around 4 or 5 penalties in one game, getting, benched for a couple plays because he's losing his mind over there. He's seething. So we'll see how it goes. But I mean, what else could you hope for? This is exactly what the NFL wants. A bunch of 8-6 teams where one week you're number 2 seed, the next week you're 7th, just by losing one game. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah. I'm really excited to see what the plan is against the Patriots this time around. I'm really excited to see the Bills go into New England. And if they walk out with the AFC's crown, which they're not going to physically walk out with the AFC's crown, there's some things that have to fall their way before week 18 at that point. But if they walk out of there with a win, it's far more likely that they're going to win the division then at that point than it is right now. And, that'd be quite a statement victory for the Bills to walk into New England. And I'm not going to say dethrone the Patriots. I hate I said that all last season, and I
Too
think
many times.
last season was the dethroning. This time around, they have to prove themselves. They have to reprove themselves. I'm really excited to see what they have drawn up and what the plan is, and most of all, how they execute, because I think that's really what's going to come down to. I think halftime adjustments. I think a lot of what you were saying there in regards to coming out of halftime with the ball and not being able to score, I think that has a lot to do with coaching. I think that has a lot to do with halftime
Yeah,
adjustments
absolutely.
and the other team knowing the opponent better than they know themselves, possibly.
You're able to script a drive, and if you're going 3 and out, obviously that script isn't too good.
Yeah, I think that's pretty bold as to what, pretty clear as to what it's saying. And Jason Taylor asks, are the Bills the 8th seed right now in the hunt? I
7th.
believe they're sit at the 8th seed, right?
Well, they're 7th.
7th, yeah,
Right?
7th.
Yeah.
Apologies. Yes, the Bills are in the picture right now. I don't think the Bills are going to miss the playoffs.
It
They're not
doesn't
going
it
to miss the
doesn't
playoffs
matter now.
entirely.
You just have to take care of business. That's
Just win.
that's you win next week, and then you got 2 easier opponents, and if you can win out, you're going to get the AFC East. And I think your chances of making the playoffs after this victory, I think they're up at like the low 80s. And if they win next week, they're at 100. They're basically at 100% as far as what they would predict. So take care
Yeah,
of
because
business.
they've only had one loss in the division this year, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So the Bills, if they handle business these next 3 weeks, but in particular next week, they're looking to be in pretty good shape going into the postseason. Travis, as we get out of here, any final thoughts that you want to say to the Bills Mafia?
No, I think we touched on everything as far as this game. We knew this was kind of the precursor to next week, and we all knew we had to take care of business. Some people called it the bounce back game, the get right game. Listen, we had to come out and win. It was 1 of 4. Next week is going to be obviously just monumental in many ways, whether or not we win the AFC East or not. But we got to put our complete game together, or the Bills need to put their complete game together, because we haven't seen it this year. Are we going to see it? That is remains to be seen. But it's definitely exciting to have it come down to the wire. If you guys want to check out more of my content, we're always doing the Friday night forecast. I know it's Christmas Eve, but we will be doing a show. I believe it will be live, but if not, it'll air at the same time.
Yeah, the Friday night forecast. It's always good stuff from Travis. Be sure to follow him on Twitter. You can find his handle in the description below, as you can find mine. Be sure to follow the Cold Front Report on Instagram, Twitter, like our Facebook page, and subscribe on YouTube. That's at Cold Front Report _Bills News on Instagram. That's at Cold Front Report on Twitter, and then Buffalo Bills Cold Front Report on Facebook. Be sure to like the show, share the show. Like the page and share the shows whenever you see them. We're always turning out content here at the Cold Front Report, and hit that subscribe button on YouTube for just Cold Front Report. If you'd like to find me, I'm on Twitter at CFR Clayton. I'm not always talking, but if you'd like to discuss, I'm always willing to discuss. It's always fun coming on here, especially after a win, more so after a win, to talk to the Bills Mafia when they're not throwing their pitchforks and fire sticks at our heads. So with that being said, thank you all for watching. Thank you all for tuning in. I hope you all stay safe, stay healthy, and go Bills.